Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We are on ayah number 221 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Let us continue بحول wa quwwatih. قال الله تعالى: ولا تنكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمن ولا أمة مؤمنة خير من مشركة ولو أعجبتكم ولا تنكحوا المشركين حتى يؤمنوا ولا عبد مؤمن خير من مشرك ولو أعجبكم أولئك يدعون إلى النار والله يدعو إلى الجنة والمغفرة بإذنه ويبين آياته للناس لعلهم يتذكرون. Okay, so some key words here. ولا تنكحوا. This is a nahi, a prohibition format. The verb nakaha yankihu linguistically means to have sexual intercourse with a woman, and technically in the Shar'i sense it is the marriage contract. Here the address is to men: do not marry the mushrikat. This is the plural feminine of mushrik, so anyone who associates partners with Allah. Now this includes all types of female kuffar, except from other places we have exceptions made with the Jews and Christians. Hatta yu'min, until they embrace Iman. Iman, we spoke about before, is to acknowledge something by way of acceptance and submission. This is linguistically, and in a Shar'i sense, what you find in the books of Aqidah is that they say that Iman is the statement with the tongue, the belief in the heart, and the actions of the limbs. It increases with righteous deeds and decreases with evil deeds. He says an amma, this is a female servant. Abd is a male servant. You notice the lam on the amma, wala amatun. They call this the lamul ibtida, the lam of beginning a new sentence. So the word amma would be a mubtada, the beginning word of a new sentence. He says a believing servant woman is better than a mushrikah. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ. أَعْجَبَ يُعْجِبُ إِعْجَاب, to please someone. So even if a mushrik woman pleases you in terms of her beauty or her status or her wealth or her abilities or just in any way whatsoever, still her kufr outweighs all her positive qualities. Then he says وَلَا تُنْكِحُوا. Notice the dhamma. This is from أَنْكَحَ يُنْكِحُ, to make somebody marry. Al-mushrikeen, this is the plural male of mushrik, so this is the men. So he's saying do not marry the males from the mushrikeen to your daughters حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا, until they believe. And he says the same thing about the male servant is better than the mushrik, even if the mushrik may please you. For example, this mushrik may be handsome, he may be rich, he may have a lucrative career, or any other avenues of attraction that he may possess. His kufr outweighs all of those. Ulaika, those people, as in the mushrikun and the mushrikat, yad'una, from da'a yad'u, to call to or to invite, ila nar, to the fire. They are calling to the fire. Because these people, if you mix in with them and stay with them, such as a husband and wife scenario, then they will have an effect on you, and they will influence you to commit actions that will lead you to the fire of hell. And Allah calls you, He says, to Jannah, bi'idhnihi, with His permission, as in He grants you tawfiq to perform actions that will enter you into Jannah. And He says that He makes plain His ayat to the people, that means His ahkam, such as in this ayah we have ahkam of marriage. So He makes these ayat plain to people that they may yatadhakkarun, take admonition from it, and thereafter act in accordance with it. So reflecting on this ayah pertaining to fiqhi rulings, we may take that it is haram for a Muslim man to marry a kafir woman. According to this ayah, it would be any kafir woman, whether she is a polytheist or atheist or anything else. However, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 5, we have Jewish and Christian women as an exception, on the condition that they are chaste. That is to say, they are not the fornicating type, or if they were, they have truly repented to Allah Jalla wa Ala. We also find the illah for this ruling, which is the lack of iman, because Allah says hatta yu'min, until they believe. So it means this is the illah for the ruling. It's the fact that they do not believe which is prohibiting the marriage. We can also find from this ayah that the husband does not require a wali, so that is a father who gives the husband in marriage, because the ayah says وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا, do not marry. It is directed to the men. It is not directed to the wali of the man, simply because the man does not require a wali or a guardian. We also find that any mu'min is better than the best of kuffar, because like we said, any positive quality that the kafir has is completely offset by his kufr. We find that people are of various grades. There is no equality in this deen of Islam. The deen of Islam is a deen of justice, but not a deen of equality. And no, they are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, most of the time they are different. The kuffar nowadays, as you will find, are completely infatuated with equality. But they've got it wrong because they are not guided. If they were guided, they would be seeking justice instead of equality and human rights. The greatest beneficiaries of equality and human rights are criminals who get off softly for their criminal acts, all because of human rights. We also take from this ayah that the woman does not marry herself, because look how Allah Jalla wa Ala says وَلَا تُنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ, do not marry the mushrikeen. To whom? To your daughters. So the address is to the men, which means it is the men, normally the father, who will marry a man to his daughter. And of course there are other such ayat as well, which tell us that the woman does not marry herself. It is her wali, normally the father, who will marry her off. For example, Allah Jalla wa Ala says وَلَا تَعْضُلُوهُنَّ أَن يَنْكِحْنَ أَزْوَاجَهُنَّ, do not prevent them, meaning the women, from marrying their former husbands. So it means that the father has authority. If the father did not have authority, then that ayah would not make any sense. And on top of that, we have many narrations which clearly state that the woman does not marry herself off. We also find from this ayah a vital lesson, which is that if you mix in with the kuffar, they will have a negative impact on you. They will influence you into committing actions which will enter you into the fire of hell. Notice how Allah says أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. So you need to look at who your friends are and the type of people you are mixing in with, as in socially. Of course you can treat the kuffar well and you may speak to them and so on, that is not a problem. What we are talking about is the social gatherings and the people you associate with and mix in with, and your companions, people you spend an extended period of time with. That is a different matter. That should only be for the practicing Muslimin. We also find that the teachings of Allah Jalla wa Ala will enter you into Jannah, as Allah calls you to Jannah and forgiveness. So those are the teachings we adhere to. We also find that adhering to the teachings of Allah, which will enter you into Jannah, is not possible except with the idhn of Allah, the permission of Allah Jalla wa Ala. That is when He grants you tawfiq to traverse this straight path. We also find that Allah makes plain to you His signs, which include His rulings, so that we may reflect and take admonition, because only then will we be led to actually implementing them practically in our lives. This is the final end game. It is to implement the teachings. Ayah 222. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ. So in this ayah, the companions are asking about the mahid, which is hayd. Of course, this translates to menstruation, which is the well-known cycle that women have of bleeding. The Yahud would not go near their menstruating wives and would not even eat with them. So they had this strict attitude towards menstruation. And so the Muslimun wanted to find out about this. Is what the Yahud doing the proper course of action? So of course the Sahaba want to seek knowledge, which is a great virtue of theirs. And he says, say to them, O Prophet, it is an adha. Now the word adha normally means something which is an annoyance or harmful. Here it means something which is dirty or impure and filthy. This is why the man does not have intercourse with his menstruating wife, because that blood is impure, and you do not want to expose yourself to impure substances. That is why you make istinja after relieving yourself. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ, from i'tizal, meaning keep away from them. So the word mahid here means the time of the menstruation and the place of the menstruation, and it also means the menstruation itself, meaning the actual process of bleeding. Now here we need the hadith to understand this properly, because if we just go by this ayah, then it would mean that the man would keep away from his wife during the menstruation period, which means he will not even come near her and will not even touch her. And this is not what is intended. What is intended is the sexual intercourse per se in the front passage, which means he can do anything else. He can absolutely touch her and fondle her. He can even have sexual contact, but without the frontal penetration. How do we know this? We know this from the hadith. This is why it is vital to know what the ahadith are saying, and that the ayat of the Quran are not enough to understand the intended ruling. He says, do not taqrabuhunna, come near them or approach them, hatta yathurn, until they have become purified. So this means do not come near them, referring to sexual intercourse. Otherwise, yes, you can come near them. You can absolutely touch them even. Again, we take this from the hadith, not from this ayah. The hadith are indispensable. As for yathurn, until they become purified, this means to say until the menses ends. Then he says, فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَا, then when they purify themselves, this refers to the bathing. Because when the menses finish, she needs to bathe before she can perform the salah, and even before she can have conjugal relations with her husband. فَأْتُوهُنَّ, then come to them, that is to say, you may have intercourse with them. مِنْ حَيْثُ, from where? أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ, Allah has ordered you. That is to say, the front passage, not the back passage. Anal intercourse is a major sin. Notice how in this ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala uses ginaya to denote sexual intercourse. He does not use the word jima', which is sexual intercourse. He uses other words, which means ginaya. It is a type of majaz or metaphor. So he says, فَاعْتَزِلُوا, keep away from. This means keep away from intercourse. He says, لَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ, do not approach them, as in do not have intercourse with them. And he also says, فَأْتُوهُنَّ, come to them, as in sexual intercourse. So 3 kinayat used for sexual intercourse. And this is because using the word explicitly is something which most people are shy of doing. And so respecting the shyness of the people, Allah Jalla wa Ala uses this kinaya. We find it in other places as well. For example, when he says أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, and when you have touched women, he's referring to sexual intercourse. But it is easy for us to misunderstand these things because we were not there when these ayat were being revealed, so we do not have the full knowledge of the context. This is why the ahadith and the tafsir are so vital. He says, indeed Allah loves the tawwabin, meaning those who make tawbah much. Tawbah linguistically meaning to return. So it means when you return to Allah after having committed sin, because sin takes you far from Allah, so you have to return. And Allah loves the mutatahhirin, those who purify themselves, both physically and in terms of their actions, that they remain aloof from evil actions which are impure. All sinful actions are impure. Okay, let's reflect on this ayah. We find the virtue of the Sahaba in that they ask questions in order to learn and implement the knowledge. We learn, like we said before, the importance and the centrality of a hadith and tafasir, because we will not be able to understand the ayat properly without these resources. This ayah is referring to sexual intercourse, and it is easy to interpret this ayah wrongly. So we end up thinking that you simply do not approach your women during their menstruation period. We take that the menstrual blood is najis, just like urine and feces, and that therefore you are not allowed to have intercourse with your wife during that period. In fact, we can make an analogy and say that anal intercourse is also haram likewise, because if menstrual blood is impure, then we know that feces is of course impure, and so therefore the same rule would apply for anal intercourse. We learn from this ayah that Allah is giving a ruling with its illah, just like in the previous ayah. So the illah is the impurity. We also take that the sexual intercourse is only allowed after two things. Number one, the menstrual blood stops, and number two, she takes a bath. That is to say, just like the bath of janaba, a full body bath, or a shower. Point is, your whole body is washed. We notice how he says fa'tuhunna, which is an order format. Does this mean that sexual intercourse after the menses is obligatory? The answer is no. Order format can be given to denote permissibility. If a prohibition is issued, such as in this ayah, and then thereafter an order is issued, then this order does not denote obligation. Rather, it denotes the same ruling which existed before the prohibition. So before the prohibition, it was not obligatory to have intercourse with the wife. And so after the prohibition, it is likewise not obligatory to have intercourse with the wife. Rather, what is obligatory is that you live with them honorably, as determined by the customs and common sense. We take that intercourse can only be frontal intercourse, not anal intercourse. As Allah says, مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ, from where Allah has ordered you. Again, He's not using explicit language, because these are matters in which people are shy, but we know what is intended. It is the frontal passage. We also take that love is one of the attributes of Allah. It's a sifa fi'aliyah. He loves certain types of people, and it means also He does not love certain other types of people. Consequently, we also learn the virtue of those who make tawbah and the virtue of those who keep themselves pure. So tawbah is cleaning yourself from sins, and tahara would then be cleaning yourselves from physical impurity and dirt, so that you are cleansed thoroughly inwardly and outwardly. Wallahu a'lam.